I do want to return to a subject that we focused on a fair amount on this programme. In the last few weeks, we have spoken to a number of people who are facing uncertainty and, in some cases, huge bills because of cladding and fire safety issues in the buildings they live in. We're going to catch up with a couple of them shortly. I think it's worth reminding us all where we're at the moment, and Sarah Corker is going to take us through that. Sarah, morning to you.
Morning, Naga.
Morning. So, numbers matter here. The scale of this is pretty frightening.
That's right. And one widely used estimate is that 700,000 people are thought to be living in these high-rise flats wrapped in dangerous cladding. But I think one of the issues actually is that there are no definitive numbers, and that's part of the challenge. The government perhaps doesn't know the true scale of it yet. And it's worth remembering as well, this isn't just a London problem. I've spoken to flat owners in Liverpool, Manchester, Sheffield, Leeds for the last 12 months or so, all stuck in unsellable homes facing these life-changing bills. And I know what many of the guests this morning will tell you is that what started as a cladding crisis has become a much wider building safety scandal. And that's because the background to all of this is safety inspections in the wake of the Grenfell Tower fire exposed not just cladding issues, but many other fire safety faults too. So missing fire breaks, defective insulation, flammable balconies, systematic, failure in regulations, really. And at the heart of this issue remains the question of who should pay to fix these faults. Is it leaseholders? Is it the building owners, the developers, the government? And, as you said, it's what struck me, I suppose, is just how many people are affected by all of this, whether it's, directly that they're in a building that's wrapped in dangerous cladding, or if they're struggling to sell a flat because of the knock to the confidence in the market. And it really is ruining lives.
And we're going to talk to someone who's been affected by this and has just received a huge bill for remediation work. We'll talk to Steph in a moment, but also Conservative MP Stephen McPartland has spoken to us on this programme. He's been putting forward this amendment on the fire safety bill. It was voted down by MPs, but it was passed by the Lords. So what's happening now?
Well, I think if we just go back to look at actually what leasehold law is at the moment. So leaseholders have to contribute towards the costs of repairs. They're liable. So you often have to pay through increased service charges, if you like. And the fire safety bill that you've mentioned there, that is going through Parliament at the moment. Two Conservative MPs, as you've said, Stephen McPartland and Royston Smith, they've been leading the efforts, I suppose, in the Commons to try to protect leaseholders. So part of that amendment, it seeks to ban building owners from passing on these fire safety costs, but it keeps getting rejected in the Commons. And the bill is actually back in the House of Lords tomorrow for the third time. And the clock is ticking, really, because, the government only has until the end of this parliamentary session, at the end of this month, to get it passed. And it's in this ping pong stage at the moment. And for leaseholders, it's causing a lot of anxiety and concern because they're worried that they're the ones that are facing these life-changing bills.
OK, there has been a government statement, hasn't there?
There has, yes. And, what the government have consistently said is they've allocated more than £5 billion to help pay for the removal of dangerous cladding. It's called the Building Safety Fund. They've also said, that's for the highest risk buildings, so over 18 metres. Those that are low-rise and mid-rise buildings, they can't apply to that fund, but the government have said there is a long-term, low-interest government-backed loan scheme that's capped at around £50 a month. So we're waiting for more details on that. And that will help people in those smaller buildings not eligible for the funding. But remember, we're talking about cladding issues here. There's a whole host of those other fire safety faults where there is still no funding at the moment. And I'm sure, the people you're going to be speaking to shortly will talk about that, the fact that there's all these interim costs as well that people need to pay. But lastly, the government has repeatedly said that, building owners need to take responsibility for making buildings safe and, where possible, not pass on costs to leaseholders.
Sarah, thank you so much. That's Sarah Corker there. Well, Sarah mentioned I'm going to be talking to a couple of people who have been affected. Steph and Tom. I feel Steph and Tom, morning to you.
Morning, Naga.
Morning. I feel you're friends of the programme now because you've so eloquently put kind of across the situation that you're dealing with. Steph, let's just remind our listeners of what your situation is. You live in a flat in Bristol, and we spoke a couple of months ago, I think, maybe 3 months ago, and just that day when we were talking about this, you received a huge bill for remediation work. So how are you doing now?
Yes, so I think it was that evening I received the estimate of the remediation costs for the building. So when I spoke to you, I think I said, I might get a bill for 20 to 40,000. But actually, if we do end up getting a bill, it's going to be, my personal bill will be around 70,000.
How are you going to pay for it?
I don't know. Mm-hmm. And that's not including any interim costs. So that would just be to remediate the building. So yeah, the whole building estimated cost is 7.6 million. And to put that into context, the cost of converting this building into flats 3 years ago was 7.9 million. So it's basically the same again.
So depending on where you live, in which type of flat you live in, the bill's kind of different, isn't it? What yours is 70,000, is it?
Yes. So it's done via the service charge, and it's done on square footage of your flat. So the biggest flat in my block is facing a bill of 156,000.
I'll go back to my question. How are you going to pay for this bill? When do you have to pay it?
So our landlord has said they are not going to put it on the service charge this year, but it will be, I think it's going to be in January 2022 if we've not managed to recover costs from elsewhere. And I'm not sure at the moment whether that will all be a lump sum or whether they'll let us pay in instalments. But either way, that's like another mortgage again. And if we have to pay it within 28 days, then I'm stuffed basically, and I think most people in my building will end up going bankrupt if that is the case.
Let me read out this statement from the company which runs your building. The current situation is extremely stressful for homeowners, and we really do want to do all we can to help. The safety of residents in their homes has been and remains Gray's principal concern. Neither the leaseholders nor Gray were responsible for the original construction and the choice of materials for the building, which has left us all in this really difficult position. Consistently, Gray has and will continue to pursue routes to reduce the burden on leaseholders, including seeking recovery from those who may be responsible and applying for funding from the government's Building Safety Fund to rapidly make the building safer in the long term. We applied to the BSF for the cost of remediating the combustible materials in the external walls of the building. The application was rejected by the BSF, who said the property wasn't eligible on height grounds. Gray has appealed this decision. BSF eligibility requires a building to be at least 18 metres tall to qualify for funding. This building is 20 metres tall. We're waiting for the outcome of this appeal. So, with the appeal underway, Steph, how hopeful are you?
The thing is, I understand that the reason it was rejected is because incorrect plans were submitted by our management company that showed the top floor as being service rooms, and that's a requirement, is that the top floor is residential, which it actually is. So I think it should be quite easily resolved. But it doesn't fill me with confidence that the stuff that's being pursued on our behalf is actually being done properly, and that does really concern me. And obviously, as a leaseholder, we don't really have any control in anything that's going on. So I don't really know what else is being done to pursue, if there's any claims against the contractor or anything like that. And yeah, I don't have a lot of faith in what's being done on our behalf, if I'm honest.
Steph, I wish you well. Keep in touch. You do keep in touch. Keep in touch with what's going on. Of course, the fire safety bill being heard again tomorrow. Tom is on the line as well. Tom, when we last spoke, you were hoping to still move to a house with your partner, but you weren't sure about whether or not you'd be able to sell the flat. What's the situation now?
Yeah, morning, Naga.
Morning.
Thanks for having me back on the show to start with.
Pleasure.
Yeah, so it's where we're at the moment. we managed to actually get a mortgage through for one of our buyers. So we did some research into the market, and we found that there was a particular company who was taking a more flexible approach to the EWS1 situation. So if you remember rightly from last time, I'm in a slightly different position from Steph in that the building that I reside in is actually under 18 metres. So we sit in perhaps what you could categorise as that grey area, which is not particularly helpful at all whatsoever. But we did get a mortgage through. So we had a valuer come round, another valuer come round, and they actually put the valuation of the apartment through. So the funds for the mortgage were basically approved. So we went through to the conveyancing process and started all of the legals. And it was at that point where our buyer's solicitor raised some questions with regards to the cladding. Those questions had to be answered honestly in terms of where we were at this point in time within our development. And the answers to those questions got back to the lender, and they decided that they would pull the funds based on the questions that remain to be answered. So we're at a slightly different point to Steph. We don't know what or if there will be any costs, remediation costs on this development. So it was one that, as I say, the mortgage company decided to withdraw the loan to our buyer.
So what are you going to do now? You're just waiting.
Yeah, that's basically it. We're waiting. We're stuck in limbo. We had to let the house go that we were in the process of buying. It was a decision that we made. As you know, as Steph's saying, you know, the timelines that are associated to this whole cladding crisis. These are not quick answers. These are not ones that you'll get in 24, 48 hours. As Steph highlighted, that unfortunately it may be January 2022, where she'll be potentially facing a life-changing bill. It's just it's got to the point where it's just it really is affecting people's lives. And it was just one that we knew that it wasn't going to be a quick process, so we decided to pull the plug on it. But unfortunately, that decision came with costs in the background that we'd already paid out in professional service fees to solicitors, to estate agents, etc. So it's just one really now where it is an absolute waiting game. But we have got to hope that government have got to see some sense in this now. Naga, they really have got to see some sense in this, that it's turned more into what it was originally through Grenfell and dangerous cladding being on the side of the buildings to things where, as Steph highlighted, people are finding missing cavity wall barriers, missing fire breaks, protections that should have been on steel framings that isn't there. You only have to do the research on this now to realise like how much this has actually escalated. And I think the government need to come out and say, unfortunately, whatever the bills are to make people's homes safe, they need to be covered, because you're just going to end up in a situation where you're going to be in a to and from with building owners and leaseholders.
Tom, I'm sorry you're still in this situation. Is it obviously not as an optimistic situation as when we last spoke? I'll say to you what I said to Steph: stay in touch. This isn't a story that we're not going to be covering again, and we're going to keep looking at this as well, because as you so eloquently put, it's affecting people's lives.